Hello, my name is Dr. Peprah-GYamfi, medical doctor, author, evangelist, human rights activist. I have the pleasure of introducing my book, Disability Nightmare, an account of suffering and horrendous treatment methods of an ailing leg. It's a personal book because the picture you see is myself as a patient in a hospital in West Berlin, in Germany. It is an account of my own experience with disability. When I was 12 years old, an ailment to my left ankle resulted in me stopping school because I couldn't go to school for 2 good years. The inspiration to write this book came during a recent visit to Ghana. I want to read a few passages from the book just to whet your appetite. So I'm reading from the preamble of the book, and here it goes. On a visit to my native Ghana in June 2021, a friend was driving me in his car to an appointment in the capital, Accra, when he got stuck in traffic. As we made slow progress along the congested street, my attention was drawn to a wheelchair being pushed by a teenage boy on the road we were traveling along. The occupant of the wheelchair was also in his teens, as well as the person who was pushing him. They took advantage of the slow-moving traffic to beg the occupants of the vehicles caught in the traffic jam for money. The scene of a handicapped person begging on the streets of Accra was not new to me. The blind, the mentally challenged, the physically disabled, one comes across them regularly. The fact that the two individuals involved, the disabled lad as well as his assistant, were in their teens, struck an unique chord in me. Indeed, it affected me in a special manner. It brought back memories of my own struggles with disability, my nightmare experiences with an affliction of my left ankle, which began when I was about 12 years old and which tormented me for several years. In view of the special interest awakened in me, I was not only desirous of handing the two teenagers a few CD notes, but also keen to interview the one in the wheelchair to glean some background information about him. Later, I met him and he revealed that he was living in a makeshift accommodation with his helper. He had to pay the rent and provide for himself and his helper. Even the wheelchair he was using, he added, was not his own. He had to hire it on a daily basis. For the next several days, my meeting with the disabled teenager would not leave me in peace. As a result of my own nightmare experience with disability, I had made it a personal commitment to do whatever it takes to help the disabled in particular and the poor of society in general. Some of my plans included setting up a health center to provide highly subsidized medical facilities for the poor and the disabled. Owing to several factors, financial constraints being a major factor, I have not been able to keep my plans, I have kept postponing my plans. As I lay in bed that night, a voice said to me, "Friend, you cannot keep on kicking the can down the road indefinitely. You are advancing in age, so you had better get into action now if you want to realize the dreams of your youth." As I pondered over the matter, a voice within me urged me to write an account of my own personal experience with disability. The goal is twofold. In the first place, it will seek to provide a first-hand account of the challenges I face by virtue of my own disability. In the second place, I hope and I pray that I gather funds for my needed undertaking to put up the Good Shepherd Disability Homes in Ghana. So, I'm going to read a chapter from the book to illustrate an example of the suffering that I went through. Of course, I'm not going to read everything, but you have to buy it so that you get to read it for yourself. But I'm going to read one particular instance of the suffering that I've mentioned. So, it's chapter 4 of the book. It's called Hitting Legs as a Cure. So please pay attention as I read. One evening, just about a year after it all began, a resident of our village called on us. He began, "I have followed the ordeal of your little one with sadness. Whenever I see him hopping around on his one leg, I feel heartbroken. Thank you for your sympathy. You can only wish and pray he regains his strength and returns to school," Papa remarked. "Well, I have a piece of good news." "What is it?" Papa wanted to know. He said, "One of my relations, a resident of Northern region, has arrived on a visit. He has made a name in his area of residence in the manner of traditional medical practice. Indeed, his practice is the first point of call for residents with all sorts of medical conditions. I mentioned the case of your little boy to him. He has readily offered to help." "Thank you very much for your show of concern," Papa began. "You certainly have witnessed the suffering of my little boy. We have over the last several months tried several herbal practitioners to no avail. Let's hope your relation's therapy leads to the much yearned cure for him." "Let's hope for the best, Father." A short silence followed, broken by my father. "Okay, I just forgot to ask, how much will the treatment cost?" "Oh, don't worry, Father. He won't charge anything. His primary concern is for the health of your little boy. He will leave everything up to you. When his effort leads to restoration of your child's health, you are free to show your appreciation in whatever way you wish." It was late in the evening. A meeting was subsequently arranged for the afternoon of the next day. At the appointed time, we called on the visiting herbalist. As in all cases, when you sought the help of a new practitioner or healer, my parents were asked to narrate the background of my case. Father did as requested. The healer listened attentively as Papa narrated the background of my case. We waited anxiously for the reaction of the healer after Father had finished his presentation. We didn't have to wait long. "I have read the stars of your son," began the traditional healer shortly after Papa had stopped talking, looking intensely in my eyes. "He is destined for great things. The forces of evil are seeking to prevent that from happening. I can assure you I will neutralize the spell cast on him by the witches and wizards." A short silence followed. I could not tell the thoughts that went through the minds of my parents as they listened to what the traditional healer had to say. As for me, I had, in the meantime, heard so much talk about evil forces being behind my suffering that I cared little about what the forces were up to. What mattered to me was putting an end to my suffering. Then the man continued, "I will ask you to go back home and return about the same time tomorrow. I will, in the meantime, gather together the herbal ingredients needed for my therapy regime," the healer instructed us. The next day, my parents accompanied me at the appointed time to the traditional healer. It was around 3 p.m. in the afternoon. It was a hot, dry day with a clear blue sky. As we looked on, the traditional healer poured the fresh herbal ingredients he had collected from the field, leaves, roots, seeds, etc., into a black clay pot. Next, he poured water to fill about 3/4 of the volume of the pot. He then placed the earthen pot on a makeshift clay stove built in the open at one corner of the compound of the home. Finally, he removed a box of safety matches from one of his pockets, put it open, and removed a matchstick from the box. After striking the stick a few times against the side of the box, he got it ignited. Making use of the flame, he set the firewood on fire. As the flames began to heat the contents of the black pot, the traditional healer turned to my father and began. I will need 3 or 4 strong men to help restrain your boy in order to successfully execute my therapy regime. Please give me 5 minutes while I go in search of them, Papa replied, and quickly left the meeting. He returned after a short while, accompanied by 3 well-built young men, all in their mid-20s. The contents of the pot had in the meantime begun to boil. The steam coming from it took a straight upward course towards the heavens, dissipating after a while into the open atmosphere. Shortly after the arrival of father and the helpers, the traditional healer turned to him and began. I will need to inflict a few superficial cuts to the skin over the sick ankle of your son. The cuts are necessary to facilitate optimal absorption of the medicine into his body. Will he be able to remain quiet, or will he need to be restrained? Without waiting for father to respond, I said, I don't need anyone to restrain me. Sure, the traditional leader inquired. Yes, I have already endured similar cuts in the past. I will be brave and bear the pain this time around as well. Next, the traditional healer chose a razor blade lying on a table beside him and began to inflict several cuts to the skin on my ill-fated ankle. Now it's time for action, he said after he had placed the razor blade back into his sheath. Getting up from his seat, he walked the short distance to the boiling pot. Fixing his gaze on the boiling pot, he began to recount words that made no sense to me or anyone else present. After chanting for a few minutes, he turned to father and said, It's now time for action. I want the 3 young men to hold firmly onto your son. My cousin would concern himself with the afflicted leg. It will be held a few centimeters above the boiling pot for a while. The exposure of the ankle to the steam and sewing from the ingredients in the boiling pot will not only help neutralize the spell cast on it, but also heal it. The instructions of the traditional healer were followed without further ado. With the 3 strong men holding firmly onto my body, the relative of the herbal practitioner held firmly onto my leg and positioned it in the part of the steam and sewing from the boiling pot, only a few centimeters beneath the ankle. Words can hardly describe the hot, burning pain I had to endure. As the steam bent the skin, I yelled at the top of my voice. You have to bear it with us, little boy, the traditional healer declared. Painful as it is necessary to cure your leg. The words of the healer had no effect on me as I kept on screaming. The t-shirt I was wearing was drenched with sweat, pouring from all over my body. If father could stand the torture, not so my mother. After witnessing the scene for a short while, she left the spot, sobbing as she left. Mother's reaction to the extraordinary treatment method of the traditional healer did not move him to cut short the ordeal. On the contrary, he urged the men holding on to me to relax not to relax their hold on me. Finally, after about 5 minutes that seemed an eternity to me, the all-relieving words, "It is enough," allowed the lad back to his seat, emerged from his lips. Before dismissing us for the day, he handed Papa a container filled with a yellowish cream. "Take this along. You should apply it mornings and evenings to your sick son's ankle. Please keep strictly to my instructions. Latest by 4 weeks, your son will be pain-free," he declared. "That is very reassuring," Father said. "I don't know what to do to show my appreciation should my boy regain himself through your efforts." We diligently applied the cream as instructed. The stock lasted about 4 weeks. Was it because his cousin had portrayed his supposed healing powers to us? Was it due to the extraordinary therapy regime he performed on me? Whatever the reason, somehow I came to consider hope. I put considerable hope in his bizarre therapy. Perhaps it was my faith in his healing regime that affected me psychologically. It may well have been, for somehow I began to start to feel less pain, permitting me to initially to venture to put weight on my leg. It wasn't long before, though, that I was confronted with the bare reality that nothing had changed. As the pain returned a few days into the therapy, the realization began to dawn on me that I was back to square one. The cream handed to us lasted about 4 weeks. Did I receive another supply of the cream? The answer is no. The traditional healer had in the meantime left the village and returned to his home in a town called Paga, about 740 kilometers, which is about 430 miles to the north of our little village. Had he been around, my parents might have approached him for replenishment. I would have diligently applied it not to upset them, even though I had, in the meantime, lost hope of his medicine leading to cure. As I endured the pain, the wish that sprang to my mind from time to time was that I would one day get opportunities to study medicine, to understand what was behind the condition that was causing me the untold suffering. So that was my wish at that time. I still stayed at home almost a year after this horrible therapy. Eventually, I was able to resume my education. But of course, I'm not going to tell every story. You can get a copy of this book, Disability Nightmare, an account of suffering and horrendous treatment methods for an ailing leg. You will not only be reading my painful experience, you also, in your small way, be helping us put up the Good Shepherd Disability Center in Ghana. For indeed, all proceeds from this book will go into that project. Beside that, the organizing committee of the project will also be very glad for any donation that you can give towards the realization of the project. For contact details, please look at the screen. All the contact details are given on the screen. Thank you very much for your attention.
To order this book, visit www.Peprah-GYamfi.com or call +44 0794 472 004 +44 0794 472 004. You will also find other books by Dr. Peprah-GYamfi, also available on Amazon and all good leading bookstore. Get your copy today.